डॉक्टर बाबासाहेब आंबेडकर ओपन यूनिवर्सिटी.
Namaskar students, welcome to Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University's video 8 lecture sessions. I, Dr. Nikita Gadani, Assistant Professor in Department of English, School of Humanities and Social Sciences at Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University. Today's our topic is Paper 3, Unit 10, and we'll be talking about the Restoration Age 2 major writers and literary works. So component of our today's topics, first we'll be talking about the objectives of our presentations, and then we'll be talking about the major literary writers and the literary work. So we'll be talking about the first, that is John Dryden, then we'll be talking about the Samuel Butler, then we'll be talking about the John Bunyan, then we'll be talking about the Samuel Pepys, then we'll be talking about the Sir John Locke, then we'll be talking about the William Congreve, and then we'll be talking about the Sir John Vanbrugh, and then we'll be talking about the Sir Isaac Newton, and then we'll be talking about the Daniel Defoe, and then we'll be concluding this unit, which is followed by important questions answers, and then will be your suggested books and suggested reading. So objectives of our today's topic, that you will be learning the major restoration writers and their contributions to the field of English literature, and how the restoration culture is represented in the major works of the restoration writers. You will be also learning the development of restoration prose, poetry and drama at the hands of the restoration writers. So now talking about the major restoration writers and their works. So first, that would be the John Dryden in 1631 to 1700. So John Dryden stands as the greatest literary artist in the England between the 1660 and the 1700. In addition to his achievements in drama, he did extremely well in poetry, translations and literary criticism. He wrote some 200 original English poems over a period of more than 40 years, including the best poetic satires of his age, memorable odes and a variety of verse, elegies, religious poems and lyrics. His prologues and epilogues attached to his drama and those of his contemporaries stand as the highest achievements in English in the Dryden's. An essay of dramatic poesy was probably written in 1666 during the closure of London theatres due to plague. So it was published in 1688. The essay can be seen as a defense of drama as an art form. The essay begins with the reference to a naval battle between the British and the Dutch. So the above mentioned four speakers observe this battle from a barge floating on a Thames. So after the battle gets over and the English Navy wins, the four speakers begin discussing English drama. So Eugenius literary means a well-born genius. It favors the moderns over the ancients, arguing that the moderns have excelled over the ancients because of having learned and profited from the examples. The name critics came from the Greek word critic, or one who is able to express a reasoned judgment on something. He argues in favor of the ancients and congratulates the observance of the three unities in drama. He considers Ben Jonson as the greatest English playwright because he followed the ancient example by adhering to the unities. Lycidas' name is probably based on the royal symbol of France. He argues in favor of the modern day French playwrights. He believes that the French drama is superior to English drama because of their adherence to the classical unities. The name neither literary means the new man. He favors the moderns but does not disparage the ancients. He critiques the barrenness of the French plots and praises the variety and plenty of the English plays. So, talking about the Absalom and Achitophel in 1681. So, it is published in 1681, is a political satire in heroic couplets. The political background of the poem revolves around the popish plot, the executions of crisis, and the moment of rebellion. So, Dryden adopts a biblical framework for the political story. The story of Absalom's revolts against the King David and its Old Testament is taken as a framework to narrate the contemporary political events of the time. David stands for King Charles II, Absalom for James, and Duke for Monmouth. So, Charles II's illegitimate son Achitophel for the Anthony Ashley's Cooper, the first Earl of Shaftesbury, who encouraged Monmouth to rebel, and Zimmer's stand for the second Duke of Buckingham. The poem satirizes the Whig party, which sought to prevent the succession of the James, Duke of York, to the English throne. So, Dryden ridicules the Whigs of present favorable portraits of James' supporters. So, in the end of the Whigs succeed and the Charles II takes the throne, Dryden turns his wit on the Whigs, a political party that tried to break the traditional line of successions and prevent James, Duke of York, so from ascending to the throne. So, now talking about the another well-known literature figure, that is Samuel Butler, and the Butler's Hudibras in 1684 is a pointed satire on the Puritans. It was influenced by the satire of rebellions and the Carvents. It has genuine flashes of the comic inside. It is a great piece of satirical poetry and it stands next to the Dryden's Absalom and Achitophel, that is written in 1681. So, Butler is a remarkable figure in the poetic development of the Restoration period. Hudibras is a parody. It takes a serious subject and humiliates it by using a law style, distort it by ugly exaggerations. Butler carried this mood into his verse also. He reduced the iambic tetrameter line to something approaching doggerel and his boldly comic rhymes and to the effect of broad comedy that he sought to create. Butler's use of burlesque expresses his contempt for the Puritans and their commonwealth. The history of England from 1642 to 1660 is made to appear mere sound and fury. So, Butler took his hero's name from the Spenser's Faerie Queene, where Sir Hudibras appeared briefly as a rash adventurer and lover. The quest knight of chivalric romance is degraded into meddling, hypocritical Hudibras, who goes out like an officer in Cromwell's army against the popular sport of bear baiting. So, Butler had no illusion. He was spectacle in philosophy and conservative in politics, destructing theoretical reasoning and the new science. Disdainful of claims is inspired and eliminations cut start contemptuous of the Catholicism and dubious of bishops, Anglican no less than Beaumont. It is difficult to think of anything that he approved unless it was peace, common sense, and the wisdom that emerges from the experience of the humankind through the ages. Now, talking about another literary figures of that era, that is John Bunyan, and that's 1632 to 1704. So Bunyan wrote two prose allegories, The Pilgrim's Progress, that is written in 1678, and The Life and the Death of Mr. Badman. So Bunyan, Mr. Badman Bunyan, he is called pioneer of the English novel. The Pilgrim Progress is remarkable for impressive characters, presentations of contemporary life, and dramatic interest. So Bunyan's style is a simple, clear, lucid, biblical, and colloquial. John Bunyan is one of the most remarkable figures in 17th century literature. The son of a poor thinker, he received only insufficient schooling and then learned his father's craft. Nothing in the circumstances of his early life could have suggested that he would become a writer known the world over, grace abounding to the chief of sinners. His spiritual autobiography records his transformations from self-doubting sinner into an eloquent and fearless Baptist preacher. So preachers, both male and female, often even less educated than the Bunyan, were common phenomena amongst the sects during the Commonwealth. They wished no ordination but the call, and they could dispense with learning because they abundant in inspiration, inner light, and the gift conferred by the Holy Spirit. So in November 1616, the Anglican Church began to persecute and silence the dissenting sects. Prisons filled with the abundant unconventional preachers, and Bunyan was one of the pioneers. Refusing to keep silent, he chose imprisonment, and after that, so for 12 years, remained in Bedford jail, preaching to his fellow prisoners and writing religious books. So upon his release, he was called to the pastorate of a non-conformist group of Bedford. It was during a second imprisonment in 1675, when the Test Act was once again rigorously enforced against non-conformists, that he wrote his greatest work, The Pilgrim's Progress. So this work, The Pilgrim Progress, is the most popular allegory in English. Its basic metaphor is life is a journey, is simple and familiar. The objects that the pilgrim meets are homely and commonplaces, the highways, the bypaths, and the shortcuts through pleasant meadows, the inn and the step hill, and the town fair on the market day, and the river that must be forded. So now talking about another literary figure, that is Samuel Pepys, that is 1633 to 1703. Samuel Pepys, it normally pronounced the Pepys, was the son of a London tailor. With the help of the scholarship, he took a degree at Cambridge. With the help of a cousin, he found place in his Navy office. His defense of the Navy office and himself before the Parliament in 1668 won him a reputation as a good administrator, and his career continued to prosper until it was broken, first by the false accusation of the treason in 1679, and finally by the fall of James II in 1688. But Pepys was more than a Burlicus, a Londoner to his core. He was interested in all of the activities of the city, the theatre, music, the social will, business, religious, literary life, and the scientific experiment of the Royal Society, which is served as a precedent from 1684 to 1686. He also found plenty of chances to include his two obsessions, chasing after women and making money. So Pepys kept his diary from 1660 to 1669, writing in shorthand and sometimes in a code. He was completely frank in recording the events in his day, both public and the private. So the major affairs of the state, of his quarrels with his wife, altogether he wrote about 1.3 million words in his diary. When the diary was first decoded and published in the 19th century, it made him newly famous as a famous and it is also published as a document of a social history. It is supreme for its rich detail, honesty and immediacy. The second we'll be talking about the Sir John Locke. Sir John Locke, like Montaigne's essay, it aims to explore the human mind in general by closely watching one particular mind. When Locke analyzed his ideas, the way they were acquired and pulled together, he found they were clear when they were based on the direct experience and adequate when they were clear. So usually appeared problems occurred when basic ideas were blurred or confused or did not refer to anything determinate. Thus, a critical analysis of ideas in an individual mind could lead straight to a rule about adequate ideas in general and the sort of subject were addicted. Ideas were possible. On the basis of such a imitation, individuals might reach rational agreement with one another and so set up an area of natural law within which a common rule of understanding was available. So Locke's new way of ideas strikes a human anti-dogmatic note, but readers quickly perceived its far-reaching implications. So by basing knowledge on the ideas immediately before the mind, his approaches also alarmed some divine who argued that the foundation of human life could never be reduced to clear, distinct ideas. Locke, the Christian scriptures in the essay 1982, in the midst of the famous critique of enthusiasm, the belief in private revelation, but his main impulse is to restrain rather than to encourage religious speculation. The essay also contains an unsettling discussions of personal identity that Locke argues that a person's sense of selfhood derives not from the identity of soul but rather from the consciousness of past and the present and the past actions. So now talking about the William Congreve. William Congreve's present came from the prominent county families. His father, a younger son, obtained a commission as a replacement in the army and moved to the Ireland in 1674. So there our future playwright was educated at school and Trinity College, Dublin. At both the places he was younger contemporary of Swift. So in 1691 he took room in the Middle Temple and began to study law, but soon found preferred the wit of coffee house and the theatre. So within a year he had so distinguished himself at Will's Coffee House that he had become intimate with the great Dryden himself, and his brief career as a dramatist began shortly thereafter. The success of The Old Bachelor, written in 1693, immediately established him as the most promising young dramatist in the London. So Dryden declared it as the best first play he had ever read. The Double Dealer, that is written in 1693, was a near failure, though it evoked one of the Dryden's most graceful and gracious poems, in which he praised Congreve as the superior of Johnson and Fletcher and the equal of Shakespeare. Love for the Love was the unqualified successes and remained Congreve's most frequent revived play. In 1697, he brought out a well-received tragedy, The Mourning Bride, Congreve's most elegant comedy of manners. The Way of the World received a brilliant productions in 1700. So dialogues is epigrammatic and the brilliant, and the plot is the intricate puzzles, and the character shines with surprisingly complex facet. So during the rest of his life, he wrote no more plays. Instead, he had a minor government post, which, although a wing, he was allowed to keep during the Tory ministry of Oxford and Williamsburg. After the accession of George Wynne, he was given a more profitable government plan. So, despite the political enmities of the first 2 decades of the century, he managed to remain on friendly terms with the Swift and the Pope dedicated to him his translations of the Iliad. So, now talking about the Sir John Wartburg, that is in 1664 to 1726, and he was born about in 1660 and had a varied career being a turned soldier, hurled and architect. His first play, The Relapses, was performed in 1697. So this was followed into the next year by The Provoked Wife, while The Confederacy was not produced until the 1735. So with the exceptions of these 3 plays, there are no writing of any note to his credit. His character was forceful, energetic and rugged. He was knighted in 1734 and died 12 years later. So in Wartburg's first 2 plays, we have all the familiar puppets of Restoration comedy. The fops and the fools being treated with the more naturalness and less wit than by the Congreve, and with far less thickness. So most important point to the all perhaps to the modern reader, his plays show a fresher handling of the life of the day than we find usual in the Restoration drama, and the 18th century novelists are certainly indebted to him in their characteristics. So now talking about George, and he was born at Londonderry in 1678. So like Congreve, he went to the Trinity College, Dublin, and afterwards joined the army. In personality, he is the most unstable and manner of the 3 later dramatists, as it shows in passionate plotting of military adventure, loving the good things of life and yet meeting misfortune with an excellent form. He died in 1707. He is noted for his contribution to late Restoration comedy, particularly for his plays The Recruiting Officer, The Buick's Stardom. Now talking about the Sir Isaac Newton, this is in 1642 to 1727. The Isaac Newton was the son of a farmer, and as a boy he invented machines, and as a graduate he made major discoveries in optics and mathematics. And in 1667 he was elected a fellow of Trinity College, Cambridge. 2 years later, his teacher Isaac Barrow resigned the chair of mathematicians in his favor. So by then in secret, Newton had already begun to rethink the universe. His mind worked continuously at the highest level of insight, both theoretical and experimental. He designed the first reflecting telescope and explained why the sky looks blue. He invented calculus. He revolutionized the study of machines and physics with the 3 basic laws of motion. And as everyone knows, he discovered the universal law of gravity. Although Newton's principle of mathematical principle of natural philosophy, that is in 1687, made possible the modern understanding of the cosmos, his optics had a still greater impact on his contemporaries, not only for its discovery but about the light, the color, and for its formulations of a proper scientific method. So Newton reported most of his scientific findings in Latin, the language of international scholarship, but when he chose, he could express himself in a crisp and vigorous English. Now talking about the Daniel Defoe in 1616 to 1731, by birth, educations and occupations, Daniel Defoe was a stranger to the sphere of redefined taste of the classical learning that dominates political literature during his time. Middle class in his birth, he belonged among the hardy nonconformist traders folk who after the restoration slowly increased their wealth and toward the end of the 17th century began to achieve political importance. He began adult life as a small merchant and for a while proposed, and in 1692 he found himself bankrupt with the debts amounting to $17,000. So this was the first of his many financial crises that drove him to make his way like his own heroes and heroines by whatever means presented themselves. And however double his dealings, he seems always to have found the way to reconcile them with his genuine nonconformist piety. His restlessness mind was fertile in projects both for himself and for the country, and his desire for politics made the role of passive observer impossible for him. An ardent wing, he first gained notoriety by political words and pamphlets, and for one of them, the shortest way with the dissertations, in which he ironically defended Anglican oppression. He stood in the pillory 3 times and was sentenced to jail. He was released through the influence of Robert Harley, later Earl of the Oxford, who recognized in Defoe, as he was to do in the Swift, a useful ally for the next 11 years. Defoe served his benefactor secretly as a political spy and confidential agent, traveling throughout England and Scotland, reporting and perhaps influencing opinion. So, as a founder and editor of the Review, he tried to gain support for Harley's policies, even when in 1710 Harley became head of the Tory ministry. It is characteristic of Defoe that after the fall of a Tory in 1701, he went over the triumvirate and served them as loyally as he had that enemy. So when he was nearly 60, Defoe's energy and creativity enabled him to break new ground, indeed to begin a new career. That Robinson Crusoe, which appeared in 1719, is the first of the series of a tale of adventure for which Defoe is now admired, but which brought him a title esteem from the polite world, however much they gratified the less cultivated readers in the city of or the servants' hall. In Robinson Crusoe, the other tales that followed, Defoe was able to use his greatest gift, the ability to recreate an environment vividly, a special skill in writing easygoing prose, and the language of the actual speech in the fictitious autobiographies of the adventure of the rough Captain Singleton, that is in 1720, Moll Offenders and the Colonial Jack and Roxana, that Defoe spoke for 2 other members for his own class. Like them, he was engrossed by the property and success, and his way of writing made all of them touched seem true. So, concluding this topic, we can see that in this unit what we have learned, that we have studied the important writers of the Restoration period, that many writers, talking about the John Dryden establishes himself as a leading poet and the literary critics of his day. Other important writers that we studied are Samuel Butler, John Bunyan, Samuel Pepys, Sir John Locke, William Congreve, and Daniel Defoe and Isaac Newton, and others as well. So we have witnessed the development of the various literary genres, including the Restoration comedy of manners and the major works of the William Congreve. So now talking about the exercises and the questions and answers. So in this unit you will be getting 3 or 4 questions. So starting with the questions, the question is, John Dryden is considered to the most important figures in Restoration literature, and why do you think that he was so influential? So in this questions you need to write the answers, and this following the second questions, amongst many other things, Daniel Defoe wrote about the Black Death in the London in his historical fictions, a journal of the year, plague here. What was the author's main interest in doing so? Then the third questions we have that it discuss the contributions of Samuel Pepys in the Restoration literature. And then we have a critical note on the write a critical note on the Restoration Comedy of Manners with the reference to the works of William Congreve. And then we will be getting the two short notes, that is Absalom and Achitaphuel and the political as a political satire, and the second one that is that Hudibras and a religious sarcasm. So this will be followed by the reading books. So for that you will go to your text and you will also Google it and you will get the many information about it. So I hope you got the informations and I hope you understood the topic, and thank you so much for the listening this unit. See you soon in next sessions. Thank you.